Okay, hi guys, another gorgeous day. Today we're going to look at the national grid. What is the national grid, how it responds to demand, and the role of various different parts of it, so pylons, transformers and generators. And look at why the current is kept very low and the voltage very high in the national grid as well. So, let's start off. What actually is the national grid? Well, it does exactly what it says in the tin really. It's a nationwide, so it covers the whole of the country, grid of electricity cables that provide electricity all over the nation. The reason why it's a grid is because it all starts with the power station. Now if your power station is down for maintenance or it breaks down or whatever, then other power stations can pick up the slack there because they are connected into the same grid. So rather than having one single supply, the whole nation shares quite a lot of supply. So how does it work? Well, we start off with a power station, and that contains a generator which generates electrical energy. That electrical energy comes out via a cable, and that comes out at 25 kilovolts, which is 25,000 volts. That goes to a step-up transformer. What a transformer does is it changes the voltage, and this is a step-up transformer, so it changes it upwards. So it goes from 25,000 volts to 400,000 volts, 400 kilovolts, and that then travels along these long distance electricity cables supported by giant pylons, which you've obviously all seen, and that carries the electricity all around the country at very, very high voltages. Because high voltages are dangerous, pylons are very tall, so there's no risk that you can touch them. When it gets nearer to your domestic supply, very high voltages are dangerous. It then goes to a step-down transformer. What a step-down transformer does is it reduces the voltage down to 33,000 volts or 33 kilovolts, and that can go into these much smaller overhead cables, which are the ones you see going down your street. That sort of voltage is fine for factories, so industrial machinery will run on high voltages, so factories and places like that will use 33,000 volts. But domestic supply, we're only at 230, so what will happen then is we'll go to another step-down transformer, and you can sometimes see these in big boxes at the end of the street, little things called substations, and they'll have a warning on saying do not touch, danger of death, because that's still a very high voltage, and that steps it down to 230 volts, which is the domestic supply. So those are the steps of the national grid. So have a pause of the video and see if you can match the correct terms with the correct words. Okay, hopefully you've done that. So let's have a go through it then. So what's the generator? The generator is B, generates electricity that is then transported around the country. 2 is the pylon. The pylon are the tall structures that support the electric cables. The cables transport electricity around the country. And finally you've got transformers, and they increase and decrease the voltage at particular stages. So, why? Why do we have transformers? Why do we change it? Well, in the middle, we have very, very low current and very high voltage. And the question is, why? Why do we do that? Well, the reason for that is, you may remember from last lesson, Pigs in Velvet, power is current times voltage. Here, I'm generating electrical power. And that can be transferred either at a very high voltage and a low current, or at a low voltage and a high current. And you may also remember that as you put a high current through a wire, the wire gets hot. So if we put a high current down those electrical wires, a huge amount of electrical energy is transferred into heat energy and wasted. So instead of that, we have a very, very, very high voltage with an incredibly low current, and that reduces heat loss. So electrical energy being transferred as heat. We waste far less energy. At the other end, it steps down again to make it safe for domestic use. Okay, so again, if you can pause that and try and put that into your own words. So try to write a sentence explaining that using those key words. If you're not sure, just rewind the video and look at the previous slide. Okay, let's move on. Right, so how do we do that? We use transformers. Now you don't need to know how transformers work for foundation tier, but there's 2 types. Step up, increase the voltage. Step down, decrease the voltage. So let's look at supply and demand for electricity. Electrical power stations will be able to produce a certain demand all day long. But if we look at the actual demand, it fluctuates throughout the day. Certain types of the day, you'll need a much higher demand. So for instance, 8 o'clock in the morning, what's everyone doing? They're putting on the kettle, they're making a cup of tea, having a cup of coffee, getting ready for the day. Throughout the day, obviously, you've got people at work, so that's going to have a huge amount of electrical use. And then peaks, perhaps due to lunch breaks. In the evening, you've got the big peak where everyone's putting on the kettle at the advertising break for Coronation Street, or people have got the oven on to cook tea. And then sort of late at night, people are watching TV and stuff. So we end up with these big peaks later on in the evening and throughout the day where the demand is much, much higher. And there's a bit of a problem. The problem is that the supply is capped, because power stations can't just be turned on and off. They run 24/7. So sometimes they're producing a surplus, they're producing more electricity than we need. Other times they're not producing enough, and that causes a bit of a problem. So how do we solve that problem? Well, what I'd like you to do is have a look, follow the link for the video that you're going to watch about the national grid, and have a go at answering those questions. So fill in the worksheet, answer the questions by watching the video. Right, how is that problem solved? The problem solved, as you showed in the video, was by using something called a hydroelectric power station. Hydroelectric power stations are perfect for this, and the reason hydroelectric power stations are perfect is because they rely on a large body of water at the top of a mountain, and when you open up the sort of floodgates, all that water pours down the hill through a series of pipes, and it powers a turbine which generates electrical energy. So you've suddenly got this very quick ability to generate huge amounts of extra electricity when you need to, and that means that it's really, really good when we have these peaks here. So when I've got a peak like that, what I can do is I can open my hydroelectric power station, let the water come flooding down the hill, turn the turbines, generate electrical energy. But then, at sort of 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we're not using any electrical energy. What can I do with that surplus? Well, what we can do is we can pump that water back up the hill. So we can actually use the hydroelectric power station and pump the water right the way back up the hill, using this spare electrical energy ready to be used the following day. And that's why hydroelectric is ideal, because it stores a huge amount of energy as gravitational potential energy. That energy can be released very, very quickly, turned into electrical energy, and then at times of the day when we don't use much electricity, we can pump that water back uphill again. Hydroelectric power stations are very widely used in Scotland and Wales because they have large numbers of big mountains with lakes at the top. And this is very clean, cheap energy. So, hopefully, you can now tell me the different parts of the national grid. You can tell me what the generator does, you can tell me why we have transformers, you can talk about what pylons are on the overhead cables, talk about why we keep the current low and the voltage high to massively reduce energy losses in the form of heat, and also how we can respond to demand. We can crack open an hydroelectrical power station when we have high demand, and then store electrical energy as gravitational potential when there's times of low demand, such as the early hours of the morning. Okay, please fill in the worksheet and keep that for your notes. Any problems, you know where to get hold of me. Questions, comments, queries or concerns at the usual address. Otherwise, guys, take care of yourselves and I'll see you soon.